The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks with his friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his assistant Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave that tent. Exodus 33 and verse 11, hearing the voice of God. We are still tracking down under what circumstances does God speak to the humans, because we have been able to realize that God is not like a man, so he does not act as a man acts. Here, if we can just look at this is a text, before we need to look into when the Lord speaks, what are the advantages of God speaking to you? If you look at verse, we can just look at verse 7 very briefly. Now Moses used to take a tent and pitch it outside the camp some distance away, calling it the tent of meeting. Anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent of the meeting outside the camp. Let us look at verse 8. And whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people rose and stood at the entrance to their tents, watching Moses until he entered the tent. Two things. Number one, when God speaks with you, it is the easiest way of winning souls to your advantage. If Moses would go to hear God, people would come out of their tents and stand at the doorway. He hasn't called anybody. He hasn't summoned anybody. He has not made any advertisement that we shall be having a meeting. But people knew that Moses has gone to hear from the Lord. So if you hear God, you notice the voice of God carries soul magnetic power, in a sense that if you hear the voice of God, that voice releases an energy in you of attracting humans to yourself. It is the easiest way of doing soul harvesting, whether it is in ministry or even in business. Customers just come because the voice of God has the energy, because the humans, even to date, they are still very eager to hear God speaking. Actually, that is one of the major need in this world, the voice of God. Number two says, until and stood at the entrance of the tent, watching Moses until he entered the tent. Look at verse 9. As Moses went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. So far, we can see two positionings for God to speak to you. But let's look at verse 10. Whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance to the tent, they all stood and worshipped, each at the entrance to his tent. Let us highlight these things. Number one, they would come out of their tent. All the people rose and stood at the entrance to their tents. So it is attractive. The voice of God is attractive. If I tell you that God speaks to me, and I say God is speaking to me, even in the churches, when you hear the people saying in the prophetic ministry, let us hear the voice of God, everybody in the church, even a baby, becomes quiet and silent to wait for God to speak. Well, because the voice of God, number one, I've told you, it is one of the easiest way of attracting people to pay attention. Number two, you're saying they would stand at the entrance and worship. And worship. This is a keyword. By the way, we should come up with a topic. What does it mean to worship? Or what constitutes a worship? Notice here, he is saying, as God was speaking with Moses, people were worshiping. And I know one of the major difficult things in this world is convincing people to adopt to your dominion authority. Moses has not told them to worship. Of course, they are worshiping God. But before Moses speaks with God, they are not worshiping. But when God is speaking with Moses, they are worshiping. So meaning, it is by hearing the voice of God, you are able to command obedience or allegiance. You are able to command allegiance and levelance. Have you ever seen a boss who does not have authority over his workers? What does he lack? Accessible authority. Have you ever seen a husband or a father who in his house, he does not have the final say? Because there is a resistance. When God speaks to you, the people around you will worship God through you. That's why you notice a church where the voice of God is clear and is true voice of God, not these town-made voices. You will notice there people worship. You will notice there you will experience contriteness, humility, submission, royalty, obedience, fear of God. People there will exercise those things that in natural aspects are very difficult to practice. Worship. Worship is not an easy thing, as people say, because worship is not lifting up hands. Remember, Jesus said, worshiping me in spirit and truth. And then Paul says, offer your body as a living sacrifice, because this is your only act of spiritual worship. So meaning, when we speak of worshiping, it is actually the deepest level of relationship with God. That's why you notice in many people's lives, the area of struggle is in worship. You cannot worship both God and Mammoth. So you find people, the worship they proclaim or they claim is always shared across between God and other factors of your life. So when God's voice is speaking, there is people coming out of their tents. Then there is people standing at their tent entrance, and there is people worshiping. Three things. When the voice of God is speaking, people come out of their tent. And then number two, when the voice of God is speaking, people stand at the entrance. And then number three, when the voice of God is speaking, people worship. So how did Moses position himself for this encounter called the voice of God? Because the Bible is saying that the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks with his friend. So two things you need to observe. Number one is the tent of meeting. If you want God to speak to you, create or build or develop a tent of meeting. What is a tent of meeting? The tent of meeting means an atmosphere of prayer. Create an atmosphere of prayer, or create an environment, an enabling environment of the active presence of God. So key number one is the tent of meeting. You can define it either it is your body, as your temple of the Holy Spirit, or the general atmosphere. You induce it or you diffuse it with prayers. So make sure you are operating from the tent of meeting. Number two is the pillar of ground. Make sure you are operating in the active presence of the Lord.